We're often told that some damage is just done, irreversible. But what if that wasn't entirely true? What if you could get a second chance, especially when it comes to protecting your brain? Well, a brand new study is suggesting exactly that, and honestly, the findings are incredibly hopeful.
And I think a lot of us can relate to this feeling, right? Especially if you're a smoker or know someone who's smoked for years. It's so easy to think, well, the damage is done. It's just too late to turn back the clock now.
Okay, so the big takeaway from this whole explainer, the thing I want you to remember is this. It is absolutely not too late, not even close. You can still make a huge difference. So let's dive into this idea, this second chance. What's the new evidence that's making this a real, tangible possibility?
All right, so there's this major study, and when I say major, I mean it, published in a really respected journal. And it's basically changing the whole conversation around this topic. What it's showing is that quitting smoking, even later in life, can actually actively slow down that cognitive decline we all worry about as we get older.
Okay, but to really get why this is such a game changer, we need to talk for a second about what's actually at stake here. What are we even talking about when we say the aging brain?
Look, we all have those moments, right? Forgetting where you put your keys, walking into a room and forgetting why. That's pretty normal stuff for a lot of us as we get older. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something way more serious, a severe decline where your memory and thinking really start to mess with your daily life. And that is not a normal part of aging. And this is the scary part, right? This severe kind of decline is linked to some of the diseases we all hope to steer clear of. I'm talking Alzheimer's, other dementias, Parkinson's, stroke, you name it. So, the bottom line is, protecting our brain function is a massive, massive part of aging well.
So, where is all this good news coming from? Let's get into the details of the landmark study that gave us these findings. Because believe me, this thing was a massive undertaking.
First off, the researchers didn't just look at a single point in time, like a snapshot. No, they analyzed a full 18 years of health data. That's huge. And that long-term view is what's so important here, because it lets you see how a big change, like quitting smoking, actually affects someone over a big chunk of their life.
And this wasn't just some small study in one town. This was a global effort. We're talking data from 12 different countries, including places like the US and the UK. And having that kind of diversity is key, It helps make sure the results aren't just some weird fluke that only applies to one group of people.
And the scale, wow, they looked at almost 9,500 people. And here's the really clever part. They specifically compared people who used to smoke to a carefully matched group of people who still smoke. When you have a sample size that big, it gives the results some serious weight, some real statistical power.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got a huge, long-term global study. I mean, it's the perfect setup, right? So, what did they actually find? What did all that data show?
All right, the first big finding is all about memory. The researchers discovered that the folks who had quit smoking, their memory declined at a much, much slower rate than the people who kept smoking. And just how much slower? Well, that slowdown was measured at
20%. Just think about that. A 20% slower decline in your memory. That's a really big deal. But believe it or not, that's not even the most amazing part.
So they also looked at something called verbal fluency. Basically, that's your brain's ability to find the right words when you need them, to just communicate smoothly. And for the people who quit smoking, the slowdown and the decline of that skill was honestly staggering. 50%. I mean, just let that number sink in. A 50% slower decline in your ability to find your words. That's not some tiny adjustment. That is a life-changing, genuine game changer when it comes to your quality of life.
So let's just look at this visually for a second. This chart really shows you the difference. It's showing the reduction in the speed of that cognitive decline for people who quit versus those who didn't. You can see it right there, that 20% drop for memory, and then bam, that massive 50% drop for verbal fluency. It's just such a powerful picture of how the brain can start to slow its own decline once you get rid of the damage from smoking.
Okay, so we've got the data, we've seen these incredible results, but let's bring it all back down to earth. What does this actually mean for you, or maybe for someone in your life you care about?
The lead author of the study, Dr. Michaela Bloomberg, she really said it best. It's just such a clear, powerful message. Quitting works, period. And this evidence gives us a whole new, really compelling reason to talk about why it's worth quitting no matter how old you are.
But you might be wondering,
Why does this happen? What's the science behind it? Well, it seems to come down to two main things. First, smoking just wreaks havoc on your cardiovascular system, and that includes all those tiny, delicate blood vessels in your brain. Second, it's tied to chronic inflammation, which we know is a big driver of cognitive decline. So when you quit, you're basically turning down the volume on both of those problems.
Now, there's one really important clarification the researchers want to make. This study was all about slowing down that normal age-related decline. And while it definitely makes you hopeful, maybe quitting could also lower the risk of diseases like Alzheimer's. We're not there yet. That specific connection is going to need a lot more research before we can say for sure.
And all of this really just brings us to one final thought. It's kind of a new spin on that old saying, you've probably heard it, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the second best time is now. Well, this research pretty much proves the exact same thing is true for your brain. Sure, the best time to quit smoking was years ago, but the second best time? It's right now.